Okay, we're at 2 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. There is a public hearing, so there is a sign-in sheet. If you're intending to speak, I'll ask you to sign in. Then when the public hearing is underway, before you present, I will ask your name and address again, just for the record. The first order of business is item 1.1, conflict of interest or pecuniary interest. Does any member of council have anything on today's agenda on which they want to declare a conflict? I see none. Okay. Instant replay, that's awesome. Okay, and then we have item 3.1, regular council meeting minutes of November 26, 2018. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Chapman moves the minutes as circulated. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? And we'll go to item 4.1. Spencer in, or I guess. Can you present or one? Yeah. Oh, Spencer, he wants to make a grand entrance where 4.1 is up, Spencer.
Okay, there are no other seats left, so I guess I'll sit here.
Okay, before we do that, Councillor Simpson very courteously advised me that we have to adopt the agenda, so thank you very much. So I imagine that she's going to move it then.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Simpson. Any discussion? All in favor? Oh. All right, Spencer, 4.1.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and those in the gallery. I'll make this short and sweet, if possible. This is a follow-up matter from a previous council meeting where a request from the Coaldale Minor Hockey Association was submitted to council. The request asked that the 5 for 5 for 25 sponsorship for the newer dressing rooms in the arena be the financial requirement for that sponsorship package be waived, and that a logo for Coaldale Minor Hockey's team be hung on door 5 of dressing room 5, the entrance door to dressing room 5. Additional information has been provided as per the staff report. Clarification for the 5 for 5 for 25 sponsorship. The number of dressing rooms that have been sponsored up to this point by Coaldale Copperheads and Coaldale Community Wellness. Clarification regarding the nonprofit versus profit-driven status of the organizations that have provided the funding for the other 2 rooms. And the question remains as to whether the $75,000 in funding provided for the 2011-2012 expansion of the arena dressing rooms by minor hockey would be able to be seen as sufficient to meet the 5 for 5 for 25 requirements of the sponsorship package that is required to allow for dressing room sponsorship and logos to be placed in dressing rooms. I don't have anything further to add to the report, so unless there is other information from any other member of administration, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Spencer. Any questions through? Thank you, Spencer. Any questions by council through to administration? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Spencer. Is the Cobras organization, are they part of Coaldale Minor Hockey?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, yes. To the best of my knowledge, they are.
So further to that, there's a dressing room that has their logo, Cobra's logo on it already. I think it might be dressing room 1. it would be a Cobra's, it wouldn't be a minor hockey logo.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, again, to the best of my knowledge, I believe that's a storage and an equipment room, and it's not currently used as a dressing room.
And just one more question through to Spencer, if I may. The board that's in the lobby of the arena, is that a Coaldale minor hockey board that shows all the corporate sponsors for minor hockey?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Councillor Lloyd?
A motion to go with option number 1, please.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Lloyd on option number 1. So I guess maybe your motion would read that council grant the request made by Coaldale Minor Hockey to allow a logo to be placed on the outside of the entrance door to dressing room number 5. And then do you want to clarify that council is applying the previously donated $75,000 as recognizing that contribution?
Right.
Is, okay, we have a motion by Councillor Lloyd. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? You get that, Lana? Yeah. Thank you, Spencer. All right. I don't think we have time to do anything else, and so we do have the two bylaws, 2 public hearings today. So we have the first public hearing is on bylaw 749-P-11-18, and that's a bylaw on rezoning a piece from rural urban fringe to urban reserve. So we have a sign-in sheet, and so with the 2 bylaws and public hearings happening, just want to clarify, which bylaw we're entertaining right now. So that was the first one that we're looking at, is the going from the rural urban fringe to urban reserve. All right, so on the bylaw, I will open the public hearing for that bylaw, which is again bylaw number 749-P-11-18. And there is a sign-in sheet. If anybody is speaking for or against this bylaw, I would ask that they would restate their name as well at that point in time. And again, this bylaw is just for rezoning of the land. There's no contemplated project on that land. It's just purely a rezoning bylaw. What will happen is that there'll be a staff presentation followed by questions, if any, by council, then any verbal or written submissions by the gallery, and then questions by council, and then closing remarks by staff, and any remaining questions, and then we would deal with that closing that public hearing or not, and then move into the next one. So I'll commence with giving the floor to Spencer. That'll have some introductory comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First question, who has the mouse? Okay, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So this presentation is related to bylaw 749-P-11-18. A brief overview of the matters I'll be discussing over the next couple of minutes. We'll just talk about the location of the parcels so that everyone is aware. a history of the parcel from a town perspective, the purpose of the zoning, advertising, and feedback, and some concluding remarks. So first and foremost, as you've already mentioned, Mr. Mayor, this is one of the parcels of land recently annexed by the town of Coaldale, and this is the west approximately 70 acres of that parcel, which is in the location as shown on the screen, north and just slightly east of Highway 3 and 30th Street. So just a brief history on the parcel itself. From a town perspective, in May of 2015, the town of Coaldale growth study identified the parcel as being suitable for some form of urban growth in the future. In March of 2016, the initial annexation proposal shows the area that's now known as Area B as being included within that annexation proposal. In October of 2016, after brief negotiations with the county, there was some additional land that was brought into the proposed annexation area, and that still included Area B. And in April of 2017, the area remained within the annexation proposal lands, and the only minor change from a very high conceptual level of land use is that the orientation of the public lands, which is kind of that green area with the blue pond, it doesn't quite look as nice as the Malloy work that's been done there, but now it shows the public area being to the east of the quarter, and what we're discussing right now is the 70 acres that is encompassed by the west portion of that quarter. So the purpose of the rezoning is fairly straightforward. As per the Municipal Government Act, all annexed lands must continue to be governed by the land use bylaw from the municipality from which the lands were annexed until such time that the annexing municipality changes the zoning to a suitable, in this case, town-based zoning. So the current zoning is rural urban fringe. That's a Lethbridge County zoning. So as a matter of process, we have a quick snapshot of the rural urban fringe land use district right from the land use bylaw itself, the county land use bylaw. I do have a couple of copies of what that looks like in a more readable format than what's on the screen, if anybody would wish to have those. And the annexing municipality, in this case Coaldale, must rezone the annexed parcels to be able to govern land use with their own land use bylaw. Therefore, the suitable town zoning, as per the growth study and annexation application, outcomes is urban reserve. Generally, that's the town's holding district, for lack of a better term, and that primarily allows for transitional uses for larger parcels of land that will ultimately be used for urban development in the future. And again, a quick snapshot of the land uses permitted and discretionary that are included within an urban reserve parcel. In this particular instance, I'll just briefly highlight almost all of the uses in the town's urban reserve land use district are the same as or similar to the rural urban fringe district that was the county's zoning, except in the town you cannot do certain things such as RV storage and a couple of other uses that are more suited to a county jurisdiction. So for the purpose of clarification, bylaw 749-P-11-18 is intended to rezone the lands described as the legal description is Meridian 4, Range 20, Township 9, Section 15, legal subdivisions 4 and 5, approximately 70 acres in size, and the intent is to rezone from rural urban fringe to urban reserve to allow for suitable town zoning to be applied to the lands that were formally annexed on April 1, 2018. In terms of advertising and feedback, the public hearing was advertised on November 27th and December 4th, and notice of the public hearing was hand-delivered to adjacent landowners on December 3rd. No written submissions were received before or after notification of the public hearing and after the staff report had been completed. So in conclusion, the decisions that Council may wish to consider after hearing any submissions from the gallery would be second and third reading of the bylaw with or without amendments, a tabling of the bylaw for further information, or refusal or rescinding of the bylaw. That concludes my remarks at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Spencer. Are there any questions of council through to Spencer? Okay, I don't see any. Okay. Is there anybody in the gallery that wishes to speak to this matter? Okay, if you like, you can approach the table then.
I see other names on there. Nobody wants to go before Nervous Liz. Oh, your name's in.
Sure.
Good boy.
In which I should talk about my letter that we've submitted. Is it better to wait for later?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't anticipating much dialogue on this matter. It's quite straightforward, but
Yeah, there's another ensuing matter that talks more about the details of the planning and so forth.
pardon me? The next public hearing would be more,
More appropriate.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to speak to the next one.
Okay.
And can you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Liz Allen, and I'm Box 516, Coaldale, Alberta. And I'm just finishing the flu, feeling a little shaky and shaken in more ways than just the flu. Well, good afternoon. My name is Liz Allen, and I have lived for 40 years on what is now 18th Avenue, Coaldale, right across from the newly annexed land. I appreciate the opportunity to present before Council and Administration today. With only 1 week and some of the neighbors just a few days of being blindsided by the town, it has been difficult to gather my thoughts. To say the neighbors were in disbelief of a future high school rec center being placed on the north side of Coaldale is an understatement. Some compared it to if Colehurst and its busy highway were to buy some land across the highway and put a high school up there. That's how much sense this makes to us. They also said it would be a waste of time to communicate our opposition to the latest proposed amendment because it would fall on deaf ears. I'm wearing my optimistic hat today. Here is my letter. Regarding the proposed amendment bylaws, number 749 P 1118 and 750 P 1118, east and west halves of the southwest 15-9-20. On behalf of myself and my neighbors who signed the attached petition, I would like to object to the following application. We oppose the proposed bylaw for the reasons listed below. If rezoning the property is what we have just learned in the past week, is to pave the way to put in an approved location for a new high school and rec complex and/or housing, we believe that it will be one of the most catastrophic urban planning decisions in Coaldale's history. While we fully support a new high school and rec complex in our town, the northwest corner of Coaldale is possibly the worst possible location for such a development and will create numerous consequences for many years. The major problem is that 90% of the population lives on the south side of Coaldale, on the south side of a very dangerous Highway 3 and CP Rail major corridor, which is a major infrastructure barrier. It is our opinion that any suggestion of developing the northwest Coaldale could amount to a very short-term and possibly irresponsible urban planning. For example, the rezoning ignores extensive public consultation and professional planning advice from a $550,000 integrated development strategy plan, which was granted by the provincial government, 2012. It preached a smart growth philosophy. Locate your neighborhood schools and recreation facilities around each other and utilized a share an existing transportation infrastructure. Since this property is the greatest distance from most of Coaldale's population, combined with that major barrier we speak of the highway and the railroad main line, there will be major unnecessary capital expenditures, operating costs, and ultimately tax burden to Coaldale citizens. To accommodate this new development, significant taxpayer cost will be created in the following ways. by unresolvable dangerous congestion and traffic bottlenecks at 2 Highway 3 and CPR crossings, to infrastructure costs to handle traffic volume in those 2 crossings, the increased safety issues for school buses and traffic in general, significantly increased ongoing busing cost, students illegally crossing the highway instead of using intersections, a required pedestrian and possibly even a vehicle overpass. The discussions during the 2012 Integrated Development Strategy meetings included Coaldale councillors, also recommended and favored by public input the entire quarter section of the Northwest Coaldale to be utilized not for housing and school development, but for instead a present storm water capacity with room for expansion, an ecotourism habitat, a wetland of provincial significance, and a relocated campground. This is also backed up by several years of meetings and discussions with the Alberta Birds of Prey Foundation. Furthermore, in addition to ignoring public input and professional planning advice from IDS, there has been continued disregard for public input since then. For example, the Malloy Basin Storm Water Project. Why has there been no public consultation with adjacent landowners and a major adjacent stakeholder such as the Alberta Birds of Prey Centre? Was it not a condition of the Alberta Environment Grant funding to at least communicate and consult with adjacent neighbours at the design construction stage? Many people have commented that proposing a high school rec centre is a backhanded way of using the proposal to gain public support for developing Northwest Coaldale when other locations might be better suited. Excuse me. Proposing just this one option as a location deflects attention from other long-term cost and hazards created by the Highway 3 CP rail corridor compared to other sites. In Coaldale, surely there must be more alternate possible locations to be considered for such a development, especially a school. The ease of transaction for real estate acquisition should not be the deciding factor of as where to locate the school and rec centre when you look at all the more important considerations such as accessibility, student safety, congestion, road development, busing, and on and on. Conveniently available land the town already owns should not be the deciding factor for choosing a location for a school and a rec centre. Also, the excitement of a new school and rec centre development should not overshadow all the other more important considerations herein. Thank you. A problem-laden location will still be a poor choice long into the future, regardless of how easy it was to acquire the land in the first place. I think about a gift horse. You should always look it in the mouth. You have to feed it. You have to pay for vet. This is like putting a half-dead horse onto a lovely piece of land. In conclusion, unfortunately, many people in Coaldale feel Town Council administration has lost its direction. Increasingly, it appears the input of residents, key stakeholders, and professional planners is being ignored in favor of land use planning and expedient land deals driven by town administration. Consequently, what is the point of attending urban planning information sessions, providing input, and hiring professional planners costing more than $500,000 if Town Council and municipal administration ignore all this input and common sense decision making? Coaldale Town Council and administration needs to improve its dialogue with the community by taking its direction from the Coaldale residents, by being more engaging with stakeholder groups even when disagreements arise, by having a more well-documented inclusive plans such as with community and economic development, by being more welcoming to community input and concerns, by not permitting ill-conceived plans to gain traction and be imposed upon the citizens, We, the landowners I represent, request the land use bylaw amendments be rejected. Yours truly, Liz Allen, and nearby residents of the Northwest Coaldale. I have a sheet of people who have signed. Like I say, when you have less than a week to plan this, some people found out this morning that there's going to be a school across the street from their house. Some people found out on Friday night. I don't understand why we couldn't have had more notice, how you can't communicate with us more readily. Thank you. Yes, all that land, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Is there anybody else that wishes to address this? This is the rezoning bylaw from urban reserve to. You want to speak to this one as well?
Yeah, I thought I'd just talk about both in general, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Please, yeah. State your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, I just got a letter. I'll leave a hard copy after, and what I'll do is just paraphrase. My name's Colin Weir, and my address is Box 1150, Coaldale. And as most of you know, for better or for worse, I'm been the main person with the Birds of Prey Center since about 1983. Okay.
Louder, please.
Okay. And just in general, going through the IDS process and working with the town back since the mid-1980s on this project, I've been dead set against annexation and development in Northwest Coaldale, partly because of my long-term vision for the center and the wetlands, which is, somewhat selfish, but it is a project that has quite a legacy for the community. And also because of what I see as just all the problems, just in general, just associated with developing across the north side of the barrier there on Highway 3. And I have made several presentations to town council about this over the last 10 years. And so this isn't anything really new. And I'm in agreement with a lot of the comments that Liz Allen mentioned earlier about not developing in Northwest Coaldale for residential purposes. I realize there might be some important commercial needs, of course, okay? But we went through the IDS process, and the IDS group and the planning group, they came up with, even though these are not spelled out in writing, they did come up during discussions during the IDS meetings with the engineers, stormwater engineers, and economic planners, and they felt that adding more housing and things like schools on the north side of Coaldale would be very disadvantageous to the community economically and socially as well. And some of the things they mentioned in general were student and child safety, busing, transportation and infrastructure costs, complicated configurations with traffic lights, pedestrian safety, the possibility and need for a pedestrian overpass and maybe a vehicle overpass, as well as traffic bottlenecks, spilling out onto Highway 3 when people are trying to access that area, and then complicating that with trains that go by, which seem to be coming by with an increasing frequency. It just leads to quite a significant safety issue. And just anecdotally, I've been filling up with gas over there at the Shell gas station. I can think of 2 or 3 times in the last 5 years when I've been filling up with gas, and I don't know if anyone's ever done it, if there have been a publication of any studies on how many times the trains have had to put on the brakes. But there's been a few, and I know that there have been cases where trains have hit some of the Super B grain trains when they're going across the railway tracks. But I have seen, I've witnessed it myself even just last summer when a Super B train was straddling the railway tracks, crossing guards were down, and the trains had to slam on the brakes, and then the truck just barely inched a few feet ahead and basically prevented quite a catastrophic accident. And I think if you add recreation center, high school, eventually what'll be hundreds of houses, it's going to be very, very problematic, and there's going to be tremendous amounts of infrastructure costs that are going to be needed that are otherwise avoidable if we were to develop this type of development on the south side of Highway 3. So there's a lot of other reasons other than just my own, I guess, selfish reasons for what I see as being the long-term betterment for a really unique ecotourism project for the town of Coaldale. Public input, during the public input sessions that went on through that IDS process, I think they were all universally supportive of the fact about not developing in Northwest Coaldale with additional residential housing. In general, too, there have been a number of cases in the past with town councils years and years ago, before some of us were even born, like in Kaylin's case probably, when sometimes professional planning advice wasn't followed, and as you know, some of the problems we've had are that with the Parkside area, just with too many houses being crammed into too small of lots compared to what the standards were at the time. And also the 711 20th Street, 20th Avenue intersection here, just the way those buildings have been encroached on the corner. I think when those buildings were coming up for changes over time in the past, if you go back and look in the old historical records, like the Old Man River Planning Commission, Alberta Transportation, often recommended against allowing those buildings to be built so close to the corners. And just like with Parkside, because of pressure from landowners, I think council relented, and now the council of today is really left with some expensive and troubling design things to fix, and without acquiring land at a huge capital expense. And so sometimes our planning is just a little bit short-sighted, and as a result, we're left with very long-term plans for our problems with our children and grandchildren in the future. Just in general, as you know, I've been involved with the Birds of Prey project since the early 1980s, and one of the things I was really pleased about is when the IDS project came along. The town of Coaldale got a grant for, and the county, for $500,000, and one of the things that they said quite a bit was to not develop in Northwest Coaldale. And that's something we've been very much proponent of over time. And with myself, so I've worked on that project day and night for 40 years or so, and you would think that I've helped bring in millions and millions of dollars to the community, both Grant Star Foundation, working with Kaylin and the town on the stormwater grants, and even back to the original stormwater grant back in 1988, the one that kick-started it all with working with Bob Bogle. The town of Coaldale received, I think, $275,000 to build those first set of storm ponds. And a lot of those projects would not have happened were it not for us building this project in Coaldale and having the support of MLAs and having the goodwill of all the different agencies and people. So we feel a little bit left out of the, I'm talking politely here, we're not that happy about it, about not being included in being dropped from the planning process. So as the Malloy Basin Stormwater Project moved along, and again, some of that has to do with conflict with the designer, I think, that was working for the design team. Basically, we were asked to supply a letter of support for the funding application, which we've always done, and the town got the funding, and then it seemed like as soon as the town got their letter of support and got their funding, we've been cut off from any communication and input into what's going on with that project over there. And I realized there was a lot of different political forces at work, but it just seemed like there wasn't any community engagement with the neighbors around the site, as well as with our organization and myself personally. Another thing is, and again is with and then just this summer, for example, we read about the possibility of a high school going in, which is ultimately going to be surrounded by an expanding number of houses, probably numbering in the hundreds. And you can imagine my disappointment when we seem to be going in a completely different direction than what we were led to believe would happen through the IDS process, okay, and through everything we've talked about, both in private meetings and in public meetings. And that's one of the reasons that I've basically pulled back quite a bit from capital input. Like, I bet you I could have raised another $1 million to $3 million in the last four years or so. But I'm kind of losing interest if, in fact, the project, we agree upon a plan, a conceptual plan, and then when it comes time to implementation, we're not included, and then it goes in a completely different direction than what we talked about. And it's not just about us, it's about all the professional input that we've had from this team of planners that we've just paid $500,000 for through provincial grant funding. The next thing is the long-term stormwater needs, and I think the reason for that project is not only for like residential housing in Coaldale, but also the need, the future and long-term stormwater needs of the county of Lethbridge. And so, and we just don't know what those are going to be in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And it seems like we're always underestimating the amount of stormwater capacity that we're going to need, and what we build is never big enough for what the future long-term requirements are. And that even seems to be amplified in the last few years. Everybody knows that about climate change that's going on. These rain events just seem to be happening with greater frequency. And so that whole quarter section, both halves that are under discussion today, under the IDS, were supposed to be set aside or reserved for long-term stormwater capacity / wetland development. And the idea was to benefit the town and the county, that increasing amounts of stormwater that was going to come from along Highway 3 could be directed over to this property, thereby relieving landowners along Highway 3 of the need for stormwater ponds on their property. That way we'd have stormwater pond here on the north side of Coaldale, a bigger one, and Coaldale and the county could both benefit from not having valuable storm pond or invaluable storm ponds taking up valuable real estate along Highway 3. And so really disappointed that the idea for a high school and houses is now going to be going into this area, and the way the rezoning is, when in fact we don't know what the stormwater needs are. They're probably going to be significant, they're going to be growing, and through the IDS they recommended not to put any buildings or housing there. So is this going to be an example like with High River, where they built all these houses and projects and all of a sudden it floods, and then the government's going to have to buy back all the land in 10 or 20 years? Because if you ask some of the residents, and I haven't lived here, I've only lived here since the early 80s, and they talk about all the potential flooding that used to happen over there, I think it's really misguided to think about putting any housing over there, in addition just for the stormwater costs, let alone all the other reasons that I've already identified here. And lastly, when you look at tourism and economic development, and this is a project that's hopefully going to go on for many, many years, growing in scale with the size of the wetlands and stormwater ponds. And if we start putting houses and schools over there, we're taking away pretty well the major place where extra stormwater ponds could be going in the future. And so we're really limiting the future possibility of what it could be as a tourist attraction. And we've also talked when we had an economic development committee here, and when our previous president of our board, Don Wentz, was on town council, it was always talked about that the town would move its campground from there over to where the Birds of Prey Center is. And especially in particular and combined with the stormwater project that was in mind here with the IDS. And now that these plans are in place for a school and housing, there's been virtually no mention of tourism, what the town's economic development strategy is, if tourism's involved, what sort of operational things are being budgeted for, what kind of sort of capital things is the tourism part of that, is there going to be extra things we're going to be working on together for bigger wetlands. So I think and I know we're going into a period of fiscal restraint here with the province, but I think we've really missed out on a golden opportunity because we've seemed to have dropped these plans for a bigger wetland and a campground and a bigger ecotourism component of that, and that seems to be completely have just evaporated. And then this year we read about, talk about a high school and housing going on over there, and it's really taken the wind out of our sails, because what's the point of investing more time and money into this project if the town of Coaldale never follows through with what the plans are that everybody's agreed upon through these planning sessions, like with the integrated development strategy. And having said that, I'm an idealist, I'm an optimist, and I thought I'd just give, not that I'm against cats, but I thought I'd give it one last kick at the cat and just come in and just remind everybody about what these long-term plans are, and that what we've done so far with the Malloy Basin project in that part of town could maybe only be the first phase of what should be happening with additional expansion in the years to come. And if we don't pursue that vision that was in the integrated development strategy, I think you're going to be losing out on significant amounts of opportunities, economic development opportunities in the future, bringing hotels and motels to the community along Highway 3. In addition to all the problems that we've talked about as far as putting a high school on the northwest of Coaldale, it just seems to be an idea that's getting traction, like it's a snowball going down the hill, picking up momentum, and we seem to have forgotten about all these smart growth planning principles that we talked about with the IDS process, not that long ago. So I think that's it. And again, I'm just against that. I think the town should just hit the reset button on this and go back to this IDS and see what the possibilities are. And then the same thing with the high school. Like, one possibility could be to put the high school with a rec center right on the highway somewhere on the south side of the highway, so you could get possibly conventions coming in. Maybe some hotels would pop up around it. So there's a lot of possibilities there. But if you put it on the north side of the tracks, I think it's just a recipe for disaster. With increased costs, I think you're going to miss out on a lot of economic development opportunities as well.
Well, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this bylaw?
Did you guys have any questions at all about anything? Yeah, I just meant if you had any questions specifically about anything I've just chatted about or talked about.
Well, I've given a fair bit of latitude in the
Yes.
dialogue, because
for
it
sure,
really
for sure. And keep in
uh,
mind, I'm not,
relative to the rezoning from
Yeah.
one urban fringe to another,
yeah,
basically.
keep in mind, I'm not really knowledgeable about the protocol here, so
Yeah,
thank
no,
you
that's fine.
thank
No,
you for your
and that's
latitude.
why I gave latitude, and
Yeah, thank you.
so it's and in that vein, if any members of council have any questions, they're free to ask.
Your worship, and maybe just through to Colin Weir, if I may, because you've had a number of points that were, if you go back into history, certainly they are very logical points. I think Alvin Fritz is here to speak later on to the IDS strategy that you had developed back in the day, and I sat through those meetings. They seem to be very logical planning ideas for the town. As I've always said about planning, is that to our planners, I've said there's planning, and then there's good planning. And so obviously we want to we've seen what the past has resulted. You've alluded to a few things, but nonetheless, the plan today is what is being proposed. With that, it's a bit of a quandary for me, and saying that is because we've developed a great relationship with Lethbridge County. Without them, the annexation process would have taken a lot longer than what we achieved, bar none. The second relationship is with Palliser Schools, and I want to be clear, is that their relationship with the town of Coaldale has been just tremendous. In fact, for which the town of Coaldale is their #1 priority in all of their development plans for schooling in the whole Palliser School Division. And they've chosen a new high school for the town of Coaldale for a number of reasons, and particularly for growth reasons. And my quandary would have been, looking at the IDS strategy that Alvin Fritz helped put together, it would have been logical for growth to happen, for residential growth and subsequential growth to be south of the highway, industrial, commercial, and other recreational growth go on the north side. But Palliser Schools has chosen a location, and they've really studied those locations very carefully. So this is my quandary, is that they've chosen a location that seems to be logical for a number of reasons. And so I'm on the progress side of things, and this annexation is part of that growth, but also part of what Coaldale is all about. You know, a great place to live, work, and play, and study. So if a new high school brings more students back to Coaldale, of which are already going to Lethbridge to study for various reasons, might encourage more people to come to Coaldale to study here or to recreate here. So those are the issues that we're dealing with, Colin, and I hope you'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I do. One of the things I should have said that was in the first page of my letter that you'll get a hard copy of is we support the initiative for a high school and a rec center. I just don't know if what the process was, if other places have been, if there's been a thorough analysis of other possible locations in the community, or why wasn't there more dialogue with stakeholders about possible locations. So the actual, it's really important for council, the school board, and the county to be aware we're not against a high school. We're just against it. We just don't think that's a good place for it to be located. And there could be other better locations for it to be considered. And I don't know if they've just, because there hasn't been any dialogue between us and the county, I don't know, or not the county, but the school board, I don't know if they've been made aware of the IDS. I don't know if they've been made aware of any of our long-term plans for over there. And I don't know if they've actually studied options for other possibilities in town or looked at some of these drawbacks in detail either. But I'm fully, and I think everybody here in the room who's going to be talking would love to see a new high school, and I have nothing but good things to say about the relationship with the county and the school board, and nothing I said should be taken as criticism about those two groups or the relationship that's gone on. So I just commend everybody about the talks that are going on in that area.
Thank you. I'd be remiss to miss an opportunity to thank you for your support of our annexation plan earlier, and I just would have, with all the engagement that you spoke of, we've have a history of trying to have a meeting with the foundation since last April 2018, so that would have facilitated dialogue that might have been helpful as well. But nonetheless, any other questions? Okay, anybody else in the gallery that wants to speak to this bylaw?
Can we question the Palliser decision?
There is no decision of Palliser.
Oh. The decision is to have a school on the north side, is that not the decision?
Their decision, their hope is to have a high school in Coaldale, and their preferred site is there, but
Can we discuss
No.
why they chose that preferred site?
well, the discussion is, basically it is a shovel-ready site that is serviceable, and it isn't in the hands of a developer, and the expediency of meeting the timelines is there, but it's more fulsome. But we are discussing the land use bylaw right now,
And no other land is available in Coaldale?
not in shovel-ready capacity.
How long does it take to get shovel ready?
Okay, thank you very. No, they're not. Councilor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. Is that not the next
Yeah.
bylaw that we'll be addressing?
Yeah.
Is the actual institutional
Yeah.
bylaw?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. All right, I'll turn the floor over to the administration for final summary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify, unfortunately, planning is based on a lot of processes, and I think it may have been lost in the rezoning processes that this is simply a matter of discussing the zoning of properties that have to be zoned something else other than the county zoning that's currently there. These are not processes related directly to the approval and development of, say, a school or a recreational facility. And I'll clarify that a little bit more in the next presentation.
And just to clarify things, can you just illuminate whether there was a lot of reference to professional planning done many years ago with IDS, and has the town not engaged any professional planners since the IDS, or have we been void of any planning since that time?
Certainly. With the growth study that started in 2014, it was formally initiated in 2015, but usually work starts a little bit ahead of the formal processes, as is the standard way of doing things in the planning profession. But essentially, in 2015, when the growth study was undertaken, there was, of course, a comprehensive review of all of the documentation that would be planning related and growth related in the town of Coaldale. And that document in particular was initiated and completed by the Oldman River Regional Service Commission, which is a body made up almost entirely of professional planners. The information from the IDS was not lost on those individuals, and the principles from that IDS document were carried forward into the annexation proposal. I don't necessarily want to go through the entire annexation application presentation again today, but the idea that smart growth and other principles of planning were not applied to the annexation proposal is they were, and that was demonstrated in the annexation application that was circulated. And I don't have that information in front of me right now, but I'm happy to go through any of that with anybody with concerns after the public hearings that relate to the zonings in particular.
Thank you. All right, and any questions of administration? Does anybody want to? I'll give one last chance to the gallery if they want to speak. You can. Have you signed in? Okay. You can approach the.
Just give you my name and I have one question.
Does it relate to the?
Yes.
Okay, this one. Okay, thank you.
Directly to the zoning.
Okay.
My question is, if you rezone this as proposed, does that preclude you going to where the kinds of things that Colin Weir suggested, that we put more of the things that are currently in order for there to be better tourism in connection with the Birds of Prey Center and extra putting a decent place for people to move. We don't want the housing there if it's going to be wetlands, but does rezoning it preclude that?
Okay, the person that asked the question was Lorraine Harrison, and your address right now, Mrs. Harrison?
Providence Close, but we lived 45 years directly opposite where this particular resort.
It was just for the record. Thank you very much. Okay, I think, Spencer, you can answer that question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate that question. The short answer is no. If we're just discussing the rezoning, the entire area that the Birds of Prey Foundation leases from the town currently and all of the other areas adjacent to that are all zoned institutional recreational. It is the suitable zoning for these types of uses in Coaldale. So purely from a rezoning perspective, that is the only suitable zoning that the town has available within its bylaw as of today.
And one last opportunity for anybody in the gallery that wishes to speak that hasn't already been heard. Okay, thank you very much. With that, is there any final questions of council? I will call this public hearing closed. Thank you very much. Okay, and then we will go to the next public hearing. It is Land Use Bylaw Amendment 750-P-11-18. And again, the hearing is intended for council and affected landowners to consider a proposed change to land use districts. And it is the same format as before. If you care to speak, I note that Colin Weir and Liz Allen have agreed that both of their presentations were for each bylaw hearing. And but if there's any new people to address council, make sure that you have signed in, please. And we will open with staff to give us the introduction to this bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's very similar to the previous presentation, so I'll try to be quick. Again, this is a public hearing for bylaw 750-P-11-18. The same information will be covered as was covered with bylaw 749. So in this instance, the location, generally speaking, is the same. The location of the specific property that's being discussed as part of this rezoning is on the east half of the quarter section in question. So again, in May of 2015, the Town of Coaldale Growth Study identified Area B as one of the pieces of land that would be suitable for urban development in the future. In March of 2016, annexation proposal included this area. In October of 2016, after negotiations with the county, the area continued to be included. And in April of 2017, the annexation application itself again included this area for annexation from Lethbridge County. Again, as per the MGA, all annexed lands must continue to be governed by the land use bylaw from the municipality where the lands were annexed. The current zoning is rural urban fringe. And again, we have just a snapshot of the uses permitted and discretionary that are included in rural urban fringe. At this point, it would be worth pointing out that recreational and public institutional uses are allowable within the rural urban fringe zoning. So the purpose of the rezoning is that we have to rezone parcels that have been annexed to a town-based land use district. And in this instance, the suitable zoning is institutional recreational. IR, as it's termed in short form, is the district the town applies to lands suitable for use as parks and open space, and in some instances, public and institutional uses such as recreational amenities, schools, and other similar facilities. As I had mentioned prior to the start of this presentation, the rezoning itself doesn't deal with specific development proposals. It simply provides a zoning where any number of suitable land uses can be considered within an individual property that has the zoning proposed for it. So again, I'll highlight that the existing Birds of Prey area that is leased from the town and all other adjacent areas, all of our other parks and our school sites are already zoned institutional recreational. So this is a relatively high-level exercise that just deals with the zoning for the property. Here we have a snapshot of uses permitted and discretionary as per our institutional and recreational zoning. So again, just for the sake of clarity, bylaw 750P-11-18 is intended to rezone lands legally described as Meridian 4, Range 20, Township 9, Section 15, legal subdivisions 3 and 6, approximately 80 acres in size, from rural urban fringe to institutional recreational to allow for suitable town zoning to be applied to the lands that were annexed on April 1 of 2018. In terms of advertising and feedback, the public hearing was advertised in the same way that Bylaw 749 was on November 27th and December 4th. No written submissions were received as of the date of the staff report being completed or after that. However, we did receive 3 requests to have individuals submit verbal presentations during the public hearing. Again, in conclusion, Council may wish to consider the same set of options for a final decision as with the previous bylaw. Second and third reading of Bylaw 750 without amendments or with amendments, a tabling of the bylaw, or a refusal or rescinding of the bylaw. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any questions through the administration by council? Councillor Chapman.
Thank your worship. Through to Spencer. This bylaw was publicized at the same time as the previous bylaw.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, yes, that's correct.
So the same dates, same time, same newspapers and all that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. So just for my clarity, Spencer, this 80 acres is the 80 acres that is part of the wetlands project that's going on right now.
Through the chair to Councillor Avery, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and the previous bylaw is the other 70 acres that is just being rezoned as annexed town land. It's not saying the school is going there. It's just being rezoned at this time because we're taking care of that quarter section at this particular time.
That's correct.
Thank you, Spencer.
Okay, I don't see any more members of council in the queue for questions. Thank you, Spencer, for your presentation. I believe we have Al Fritz is on deck. If you can state your name for the record, and
Yes.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Alvin Fritz, architect. I was involved with the IDS back at its inception, and since then have been engaged by landowners of the recent annexed lands, and I'll explain that in the context of my presentation. But Your Worship, Mayor Craig and councillors, administration and public, just thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I was wondering, Spencer, if we could pull up the 2017 annexation plan. I'll briefly explain who I'm representing today. That's probably pretty good. I borrow the mouse and then I'll point with it. Thank you. So I have been quite miraculously engaged by the people that are south of the highway that actually own the land. So the Patet lands, formerly the Blakey lands that you see here, their land was identified in the annexation for commercial lands. Then we have as well John Van Heerden, immediately west of the what was formerly Group Country Residential along Land of Lakes. Brian Stoutesdijk, and you are aware that the Elk Dairy Farm is on there as well. He has a huge desire to be relocated as far as the dairy farm is concerned, because that would be good for the town of Coaldale, particularly with their prevailing west-southwest winds. Then we have as well the Funk properties, which are directly adjacent to the golf course. And then we have the area south of Funk's, which is Ivor McGill. And that is actually the only one that I contacted. The rest had all contacted me to do an area structure plan for them. And so my client base has wanted me to only express optimism in every way. I believe that Coaldale is an incredible town. I believe that you have huge propensity for growth. I think that there is greater safety in this community than many other communities in Alberta, and it's because of policy that you as councillors have established, and we're grateful for that. We believe that that will lead to an incredible bedroom community for Lethbridge, and to one where it ultimately has incredible strength on its own. And we believe that you know, the annexed lands will be populated much quicker than all of us can think. It was interesting because we did hold a brief presentation of what our plans are for the annexation. We're trying to get input from the community. We had upwards to almost 38 to 40 forms filled out at a recent public display that we had at the community center, which kind of optimistically showed what all our thoughts are. And just to give you a little bit of an overview without showing you the plan, the concept, of course, is that we would have potential for very good commercial development south of the highway, along the highway. We have the potential for what we called an energy node that would straddle both the commercial and the residential. The yellow is residential, and it would have an ability to have excellent profile and visibility, and we were hopeful that it could have some institutional ramifications for administrative space for Coaldale and other such functions that would then dovetail with some medium density residential. We then saw an energy node again that would straddle Stout Estates lands with Van Heerden's, and it would be an energy node that would be more appropriate and for community-style development that doesn't need the exposure of the highway. So there, as Dexter Durfee was one of the first people that actually arrived at our consultation, and he said to all of us that were there, the representatives of all of the landholders, that no matter how quickly we were to assign school sites, the growth in Coaldale will outstrip the ability to provide schools in Coaldale. So that was very encouraging for us, very optimistic, and we're very grateful for that information. I did want to mention as well that I have Graham Auerkirk with me. Graham is my right-hand man in my office and worked diligently at developing the plan with us. We have also engaged with Jeffrey Dyer, who was one of the planners at the time of the integrated development study that did much of the leading thought for planning, and he is working with Ken Venner at Brown and Associates in Calgary. We work with them on an ongoing basis for similar styled projects in the Calgary Fringe, and just we're grateful for that. And so the only concerns that were raised were on the Funk lands, because we thought that the golf course would really lend itself to having some higher density. I think that Coaldale really needs to have a variety of housing types and styles, and 2- and 3-story apartments would be well received. However, it appears that maybe not right on the fringe of the golf course. We're trying to explain to the people on the golf course, listen, these will be very beautiful homes, like the apartments. Now remember this, I had this sort of interesting situation on Sanderson on the Ridge overlooking Fish Creek Park, where we had a very gracious counselor who said, listen, you might live in $1 million homes. These are $1 million condos. Indeed, today, those condos sell in excess of $3 million overlooking Fish Creek Park. And so I think people were starting to get the vision that all this does is have you no longer have to look after your own yard, your own, the heat loss of all of your roof being an individual development, but it's every bit the scale and character and the quality that you would expect. And so the desire there was just to create a variety of building types. And we think that all of this annexed land will do that, will contribute effectively. We're very excited to see that the bike path, which was our vision, which has come together through St. Mary's, and I understand I'm going to have a chance to present that to you very shortly. But there, just to say that St. Mary's has agreed to allow its banks to become the major connecting link, and so we're well on our way. We have over $1.5 million collected towards a bike path. We're excited to see how it has tied into the neighborhood. Many of the planning issues are very, very strong. Like it's hard to argue where roads can potentially even tie in, given the group country residential and the golf course. So in many ways, the design has very little leeway in terms of where interconnectedness can occur. So as far as we're concerned, whatever can sustain buoyant and optimistic growth in Coaldale is what my constituents and owners would like to see supported, and that is, I think, the tough question for all of you as councillors. But we wanted very much to have an awareness that we have worked together. The earliest people that have employed me have worked with me for over 4 years. The more current ones have just joined us in the last year and a half. I have never seen in all of my 30 years of collaborating on projects like this so much unity of mind, and it's because these people grew up up in Coaldale. It's their home. They have a desire to see Coaldale succeed. And so I can't adequately express the buoyancy and the optimism about future growth in Coaldale and how they can be a part of it. Huge desire to contribute, and understanding and knowing that there's a lot of logistical issues of engineering and so forth and bringing services to there. But that is the only statement that I'd like to make today is just a buoyant optimism about seeing Coaldale become all it can be, and very proud of what you are as a community. Thank you.
Questions through to the presenter? Thank you. Okay, and that's in the same vein as the latitude given the previous speakers. So I think Douglas Bergen, did you emailed and you were going to be a scheduled presenter as well?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm not signed in, but I did write in. Would you like me to sign in as well?
Yes, please. And just for the record, reiterate your name and for the record.
Your Worship, members of council, my name is Douglas Bergen, born and raised in this town. Very proud to be a part of this community and its growth. I thank you for the opportunity to share here this afternoon for a few moments. I have read through your capital improvement plan proposal, and I'm very impressed. I'm very, very grateful for the leadership that this council is bringing to our community and for the very aggressive growth that we are going to see because of your planning. So fantastic work. I'm here to speak on behalf of a number of citizens regarding the proposed school site on the north side of Coaldale, which is what, of course, you're considering today. We're elated, of course, to see that a new high school will be coming to Coaldale, not to mention a field house. Very, very positive for our community. And of course, we're eagerly anticipating this facility and recognize the need for proper siting of such a facility in order for it to succeed for its ultimate user group. I lived on the north side of Coaldale for 10 years, from 1987 to 1997, and obviously that was some 30 years ago when I first built a house over there. And there was regular conversation at that time with regard to the safety of the crossing of the tracks and Highway 3. And there was much dialogue, I attended several meetings, with regard to an overpass and a pedestrian overpass and what that might look like for safe passage of school children. It never happened. And in my opinion, that is a good thing, because I find them very unsightly and seldom used. I believe that a level crossing, that level crossings are the most viable form of crossing the tracks and the highway long term. With the reduced speeds on Highway 3 over the years, the current intersection has become much safer. I don't believe we've ever seen or experienced a severe pedestrian accident at that location. Thank goodness for that. I have considerable real estate interests on the north side of Coaldale, and selfish ambition would dictate that I would be in full support of a school on that side of town. Fortunately, that does not drive my opinion of sound planning. I, and the people I represent, strongly feel that the school location will be compromised if better access is not implemented. The two intersections that currently serve the site will suffice for vehicular traffic, but are grossly inadequate for pedestrian traffic. It just doesn't seem to make sense to locate a high school basically across the street from a McDonald's, with students having to travel a kilometer to get to their preferred choice of meal. We are in support of the master plan and applaud you for your work and in gaining not approval, but certainly potential for a new high school for our community. And we're here to help you build, not work against you. So all we're saying is we respectfully submit that a third level crossing must or should be a part of the proposal for this school site to be a success. Many children will want to access the field house after hours for sports events and will be forced to travel a very circuitous route should a third crossing not be developed. We therefore urge you to include a controlled level crossing at the Land O'Lakes Drive intersection with Highway 3 to cross at that location to the new site. Thank you for your time.
Any questions through to Mr. Bergen? Mr. Fritz, you.
Just once you're done with Mr. Bergen, I have one more comment.
Oh, okay. Okay. So any members of council have any questions? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Bergen.
Can I ask what a
Okay.
level crossing is?
Then, Mr. Fritz, you wanted to do a follow-up?
Yes, I just went through my notes and just want to make sure I did not miss any thing that my clients had asked me to express, and that is that it's very much felt on behalf of my clients and that I'm working with that Birds of Prey is just a critical entity in all of this and very much a very attractive and desirable part of what Coaldale is and can become. I'm reminded of the years when I used to drive through Drumheller and see some very, poorly crafted dinosaurs and so forth. And one day we got the Tyrrell Museum and everything just took off. And our belief is that Birds of Prey will be all of that and more a major impetus for driving development. And so to see the needs of Birds of Prey addressed to the greatest extent would be part of the heart of the people that I'm working with.
Okay. And does anybody in the gallery have any further presentations? You can sign in, please. So your name and address for the record, please.
Helen Layton, Box 1554, Coaldale. I'm looking at that map, and we can see that 90% of the population before the annexation is on the south side of the highway. And then you add the annexed areas, and if you had to ballpark it, I would say it's even over 90% with the annexed. More like 95% of the population will be on the south side of the highway and the CPR tracks. And it would only make sense to keep a high school on the south side of the tracks. And where it presently is, my understanding is that Kate Andrews is underused presently. But it has a lot of land, and a high school could be built right on the land and the property where it sits now without disrupting the school. And then they could transfer over, and then the town could decide what to do with the older building. As far as a school on the north side of the tracks, if council decides that that needs to be a school, it would make way more sense for it to be an elementary school. Because then it would provision the people on the north side of the tracks, because there are young families there. And future building will provide an elementary school for the subdivisions that you guys would like to build there. An elementary school makes way more sense than a high school on the north side of the tracks. If there's going to be a school, it should be an elementary school, and keep the high school where most of the population is, on the south side.
Is there anybody else in the gallery that has any presentations to make? No? Does everybody feel that we've had ample opportunity to speak? None, Spencer, you can give your concluding remarks.
I have no further comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any questions through to Spencer?
guess my question is, why were we not informed of a high school? Ever in our talk, Spencer, you met with Ross Taylor, didn't mention a high school last week. Why has it been like a secret, and why did we feel like we had been blindsided a week ago?
I don't think those assertions are quite accurate and fair.
I can only say what I know. I can only say what my neighbors know when they say they had no idea.
You don't have to respond if you want. You're more than welcome if you want, Spencer.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Ms. Layton. The school and the discussions about the school started, to the best of my knowledge, I might ask Council or Administration to help me out with timelines, but the division held a meeting at the high school library a year ago, July, indicating there would be a preference for a site north of the tracks. That was a public meeting, open to the public, advertised for the public. There were value scoping sessions, a number of meetings that had to be had with the school division subsequent to that. And those were all very quick, and there wasn't a lot of understanding of whether there still isn't a complete understanding of whether the school is going to be funded. Beyond that, the matters before the council and the gallery today are not related to the school. They're related to the zoning of the properties.
Thank you. And just to clarify, there was an earlier ask about the siting, and the one mention that Palliser had about siting the school was that they didn't want to cluster them on the south side of Coaldale, in proximity to the existing schools. Their preference by Palliser was not to have proximity to existing schools. And to reference the value management session that many people that in the community were invited to, that was populated by professionals in the education system and the province of Alberta with regard to schooling, and there was a great deal of dialogue on the types of schools, the options, and a number of different factors. And what rose from that group of people that were brought together was the assessment that a high school would be the best option going forward. Councillor Avery.
And I think it's also got to be considered with this high school, they don't want to put it in the middle of the center of town because they want to change the curriculum. They want to entice children to stay here to go to high school rather than going to Lethbridge. They want to look at some environmental programs, some agricultural programs, some ecological programs to try and keep them here, bring some post-secondary into the high school to have our kids learning more than the basic high school programming, which can't be done if they were built on the existing site, because where do you plant a plot of barley for these kids to study? Where do you get a few acres of hayland for them to learn the basics of farming? And this is stuff that the school division has talked about, is expanding the curriculum so it's not just the English, social stuff that they're learning today. It's how can they broaden that, and working with the birds of prey, having a program that the birds of prey can work into the school programs.
Councillor Chapman.
But why not build?
Councillor Chapman, please.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just through to Spencer, just with regards to the proposed redesignation. My question to you is, are you aware of any master plans or ideas for for purposes such as what the birds of prey have talked about, or any other planning that might impact the zoning for the two bylaws?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, there are a couple of planning processes in place that need to be looked at. The town's municipal development plan is being looked at this next year. That's almost 20 years old, that plan, and we need to understand how the town is going to grow over the next 20 in the existing areas of town and the newly annexed areas. Beyond that, Urban Reserve is a holding district like any other annexed area will likely go to. And with consideration for the fact that the Molloy Phase 2A infrastructure takes up a significant amount of the east 80 acres, and that's the only suitable district that we have, there's not a lot of other consideration to be made for what the zoning could be for that particular piece of property.
Thank you. Just a subsequent question. There'll be public engagement for each of those processes, I would presume.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, if you're speaking about the municipal development plan, the review of the town plan, of course, yes.
Thank you.
And this gentleman, if you can identify yourself and
Question.
if you can, your name?
Jake Elfring,
Okay, thank you. And your address?
Post Office Box 516. Now, in regards to the new school, what's wrong with building it on either A, M, F, or O on the south side of the highway, where there's no traffic concerns, like on the north side?
Well, the opportunity, as was alluded, the opportunity of a new school in Coaldale is an emergent item that Palliser has brought forward, primarily because they had a higher priority school, and in that instance, you know, it dropped down in the ranking, and with the site-ready ability that we have to fundamentally bring that that site operational for the needs of the school, we can do that with within the timelines of Palliser, whereas we do not have the full servicing of water and sewer to reach parcel A at this point in time, and that would take us out of the scoping for the school's timeline. So this is the, you know, do you have a presentation again, Mrs. Layton? Or?
Just a comment on what he said. Is that allowed? In the middle of Coaldale, just south of St. Joe's School, there's 400 annexed acres of unused land presently, and that's really, really close to the quads. And if there was a school built there, there's plenty of land for barley fields, hay fields, whatever, as well as access to the quads.
Okay, and so that's assuming that people in the audience know the servicing capacity of our existing water and sewer lines, which I do not believe anybody within the gallery has that expertise and can make that judgment that that is a suitable location for a school, because I don't believe that that's the case. So, is a point noted, though. Is there any other members of the public that want to present?
I would just like to reiterate the fact of busing. When Country Farm kids come into school, there's kindergarten to grade 12 on that bus. That every single bus is going to have to cross that intersection every morning, either one or the other, to get the kids over to that school. I don't know, like you say, I don't know how much water you've got service. I don't know how many school buses there are, but I've seen at 3:30 or whatever, what seems like 100 buses going through that intersection as it is, without even coming across to pick up kids at the high school. I really feel that Palliser has not been educated as to the water retention. I think they need to put their school on an arc, because that water level is so high on that land, as it is across the street on ours. As we've had floods many times, just recently we've had water running all across our fields. So I just don't feel that it's fair to Palliser for you as a town and administrators not to educate them enough on physically what is going to happen with all those crossings. I don't get it. It's beyond my comprehension.
Well, thank you. As I said, at the value assessment, there was discussion on busing, et cetera, and that would be purely operational on Palliser's part if they want to reconfigure the central hub of their busing. I mean, they could certainly have other options. So, I mean, that is within their purview. With respect to the elevations of land, with all the groundwork and whatnot done in that area, would it be safe to say that the elevations are different now after the Malloy Drain 2A project has been commissioned?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did construct, as you know, as neighboring landowners, a large constructed wetland across the street from yourselves on the east half of Area B, that area indicated in the green. We worked with gravity in our favor and constructed the holding ponds in the lowest part of that quarter section with the idea that the next lowest part, you go north, not west. The area that's marked by yellow in the west is significantly higher topographically than what you see in the green. So if any stormwater retention were to take place, digging up high ground doesn't make logistical sense. So the idea would be to continue the stormwater expansion to the north where it's naturally lower. This has been engineered, it's been investigated by several firms. We've done our research with respect to the stormwater such that it's a benefit for the existing landowners as well as future landowners.
And it has been untested to date.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Councillor Simpson?
So Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong, but the wetlands that are sitting on this is the only zoning that could apply to that piece of land for the wetlands, right? Whether a school is placed there or not, we're not talking about the school, we're talking about the zoning itself, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Simpson, that's correct.
Okay. And so one last opportunity for any new delegations. Okay, seeing none. Any last questions of council? All right, good. I will close the public hearing, and at this point in time, I would like to thank everybody who took the time out of their day to be with us, to present and to listen. Myself and council recognize that there have been some concerns raised regarding the proposed school and recreational complex that is being discussed for this area just west of the Malloy Drain Phase 2A constructed wetlands. In the context of the strong and sustained growth and change taking place in Coaldale, we want to highlight the fact that each project contained in the capital plan, including the possible joint high school multi-use recreational facility, includes a commitment to public engagement. As the case of the recreational facility and school, the commitment is to inform the community of the proposal and to work with the area landowners to mitigate concerns throughout the process as much as reasonably possible. As council, we do not view the joint school recreational proposal as a project in isolation, but rather as an infrastructure catalyst that will stimulate a number of much needed connectivity, pedestrian, and transportation improvements on both sides of Highway 3, including but not limited to pedestrian pathways along the north side of 11th Avenue and 16th Avenue, pathways along 30th Street, north and south, major intersectional improvements to Highway 3 and 30th Street, road widening to 18th Avenue and 30th Street. For the school and recreation facility in particular, there was a need to work with the school division as quickly as possible to allow the division to prepare their bid package for the provincial funding decisions that will be made in early 2019. As the community is very much aware, Coaldale's elementary and middle schools are bursting at the seams, and the existing Kate Andrews High School is facing an opposite phenomenon with declining enrollment. And the best way to address this issue from Palliser School Division's perspective is to construct a new high school knowing the province is much more likely to fund a value-added proposal, and again recognizing the long-standing need for new recreational amenities in Coaldale, the recreation facility was seen as a natural fit. In this regard, I want to thank the recreational working group for their work in raising the issue that the field house is a priority item. The newly annexed lands have been identified as they are relatively easy to access. With that in mind, I do need to clarify that yes, we understand there is a need to work with area landowners throughout the process associated with the growth of the town. However, I also need to clarify that today's hearings were focused on relatively high-level matters, including the zoning of each parcel of land, which, as clarified by Spencer Croyle, as a necessary process for all lands that were annexed this past April. I want to assure that all area landowners that we are committed to working with you to ensure we are growing our town in a responsible manner. We have specific process that are planned that will be rolled out, which are focused on ensuring we are informing and involving the community as proactively as possible in the work that we direct our staff to do. As council, one of our strategic goals is to make Coaldale a complete community and enhancing the connectivity of both sides of the highway. We do not see or want the rationale for abandoning the north side of Coaldale and place all of our investment onto the south. We feel the location of the high school as proposed is a great idea in the long-term interest of the community, and I give your assurance, our assurances that we need to address safe vehicular and pedestrian access to the, as that is a paramount concern for council. And we will have a detailed planning process involving that. So thank you very much for that, and we'll resume our public agenda. The next item on the agenda is 6.1, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 749-P-11-18. Okay. Maybe we'll take a 5-minute break for council. We've been sitting for a while on that, so we'll take a 5-minute break for hydrogen.
One beside you's on. Turn it off.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back into session, and we'll pick up where we left off. Item 6.1, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 749-P-11-18. Spencer, do you have anything to add?
Unless there's further clarification needed, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman, are you wishing to speak? Or?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just a question, and then I'll make the motion. Was there ever a submission from Palliser on any of the rezoning?
Through the Chair to Councillor Chapman, no, there wasn't. And as indicated during the public hearing, there wasn't a necessity to have that because these zonings are somewhat unrelated to the specific land uses that will be allowable, but are not related to this process.
Okay, and Councillor Chapman?
I'm prepared to make the option number 2. That council after consideration received at the public hearing may table the matter for more information.
So we have a motion to table. All in favor? Okay, all opposed? Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand, heard what was said during the public hearing, but this really is an option just to rezone a piece of land to allow us to move forward with something into the future. So given that, I would like to propose that we move option 1, which is to consider the submissions and that we pass first reading of this bylaw.
Second reading?
Or second reading of this bylaw, I'm sorry, sir.
All right, so Councillor Holm, to be clear, you want to sponsor second reading of this bylaw? Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Chapman? Okay. Councillor Avery sponsors third reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? Okay. And then we have the next item, 6.2, land use bylaw. And it's proposed land use redesignation bylaws number 750-P-11- is that the same number? No, okay, yeah. Different numbers. 750 now. Okay. And Spencer, I think after a long afternoon, you probably will have the same answer that you don't have any further to add. Okay. Is there any questions of administration? Councillor Simpson.
I'll move for a motion for second reading of the bylaw.
Okay, Councillor Simpson sponsors second reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? Call a question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Call for, well, no, I won't call. Councillor Pauls. Third reading. Okay, Councillor Pauls is sponsoring third reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous as well. Thank you. Spencer, you're getting your fair share of airplay today.
If I may, for this
You're gonna you want to share the limelight. That's very noble of you. Okay, we're ready to roll on that one then.
So bylaw 751R-12-18 was brought to you by way of the November 26th council meeting. We were asked to bring back the bylaw, looking at the times for people setting out their bins and bringing them back in onto their property after they were emptied. So part 20 A and B of the bylaw was looked at, as that is where the times are stated. So taking into people's considerations as working shift work, how bylaw enforcement would work, not wanting to be out when it was dark out, especially in the wintertime, So the times I came up with, and definitely can be changed or amended, which is in the options, was to be set out instead of at 7, not before 7 p.m., the night before, was 5 p.m. People are coming home from work. They can take their bins in. If they're going on night shift, they can be set out at that time. And then for them to be brought back in was 8 a.m. After their day of collection. So that is people going to work in the morning. It may not have been emptied when they got home from work. They can be brought in before they leave for work. If they're coming home from night shift, move back in. You're up in the morning, you may be out at that time. That and looking at enforcement, you know, we're not going to be likely enforcing before 8 a.m. as our bylaw officers are not on duty, or after 5 p.m. That may not be what they're out enforcing. There may be other issues within the town. As well as maintenance. Maintenance likely would not be done after 5 p.m. during the week, or just starting at 8 a.m. in the morning. So we also did look at the bylaws for Tabor and the city of Lethbridge. So Tabor has the same as we currently have, is the 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. clauses. The city of Lethbridge has that they must be removed from the street or lane within 24 hours of being emptied on the collection day. So those were two of the neighboring municipalities. I with Public Safety and Public Works, went through the bylaw and neither had any issues from a maintenance or enforcement perspective. So we have 3 options that we recommended that council pass it as presented, that you pass it with changes, or the third one that you direct staff for further changes to the bylaw, but just noting that this would result in the location of pickup being changed back, which will happen on January 2nd, without this bylaw being amended.
Okay, Cindy, I see a few red lines, you know, that kind of have some wording for deleting director of operations, and so that there were just a few editorial changes in addition.
When I went through with Terry, the director of operations, we kind of went through, and it was there's kind of a number of areas where there'll be different people doing it, not just looking at changes of the bylaw or making those decisions. So that's why it was changed to CAO or designate, as it would cover the varieties between him and I.
And then with it, at the very end, it refers to the Municipal Government Act, dated 2000, I believe, with that. Should we have the more recent MGA reference there, or is there a reason to have the older one? Spencer?
Just for clarification on that matter, Mr. Mayor, the long title for the act, however it's amended currently, I think we're at the October 1st, 2018 edition of the act. RSA 2000 is the standard way of notating it, long form.
Oh. So this isn't incorrect this way?
That's right.
Okay, I just, while we were looking at it, I thought. Yeah. And then operationally, one last question on my behalf. Is there any, like, 8 o'clock in the morning for the take-in time, would there be a challenge if people that like to sleep in a little bit, would 9 o'clock interfere with the normal routine of the town and the operations and all that stuff, or would that create any complexity?
I don't believe it would. Terry didn't seem to have any objections to any time in the morning. We just put 8 as that would only be a half an hour after they would started. So if there was anything left out, or whether there wouldn't be anything in their way. I mean, right now they work around the bins that are out. So if it was an hour later, I couldn't see there being an issue.
Here's a question I had. Any other questions through to administration? Councilor Chapman?
So the normal times for pickup are from what times in the morning to what times at night?
They start at 7 a.m. and they need to be completed their routes by 7 p.m., barring any unforeseen circumstances.
Okay, thank you. That's why we've missed garbage pickup occasionally.
Thank you for attending to this so quickly. Is there any questions or more comments, or what does council wish to do with? I think we have the recommendations that we could do all 3 readings today, or we could do any combination of that we want. It's relatively administrative review of the bylaw, and I imagine that there would be, if there was any future enhancements or changes to municipal solid waste collection in Coaldale, that it might be a catalyst for a revision at a later date, but.
Correct.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. I move first reading of bylaw 751-R-12-18 as amended.
Do we amend it, or?
No, the way it was amended and presented to us.
As presented today? Okay. All right. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Councillor Chapman? Councillor Chapman moves second reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? Call the question? Okay, that's unanimous. Councillor Lloyd?
Move third reading.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay. Thank you for your work on this. Kyle, sitting back there. Thought we wouldn't notice you, eh? All right.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. In front of you, you have the bank rec for October for the town's general operating account. Doesn't include the investments the town has. Just looking to see if there's any questions on the bank rec. Beginning balance 11.2 million, ending balance of 11.78 million.
So the 479 deposit, was that FCSS grant or something?
Majority of it, yes. Combined with fines and traffic penalties.
And thank you for adding the reconciliation on the visa. Any discussion or any, how does council wish to proceed with this matter? Councillor Holm? Okay. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
And we have Sandy, do you want to speak to the development stats at all, or? Oh no, I guess we got Clayton here. I'm getting dyslexia here. Sorry, Clayton. My bad. Emergency management.
So just a brief update on emergency management and the CPO program. So just on the next slide, please, and one more. Oh, there it is. So this just goes over our number of files compared to 2017 to 2018 for just the town of Coaldale. So our complaints, our case reports were down just a little bit. Our officer generated files, which is our proactive stuff, remained about the same. I did this report a little early compared to last year, so we're probably above that now. and significantly higher violations as well that we had in 2018 compared to 2017. Just to give you a picture of what our CPOs do every day, as we did have our regional partners involved currently. This is just our file numbers for the entire region, so Picture Butte, Coaldale, Barrens, and Colehurst, just to kind of paint the picture of how much time they spend with all the files that they do have. A large portion of our complaint files are related to animal complaints or in the community standards bylaw realm. There's a bunch of other types of our files, but that's where the majority of our time is spent for our CPOs, and this is just Coaldale specific as well. With our officer generated files, a lot of that time is spent with unsightlies, snow removals, as well as dealing with business licensing type stuff. Our school resource officer was quite busy throughout the 2017-28 school year. He also participated in a lot of the changes for Jenny Emery and St. Joe's with parking, stuff like that, along with Spencer, in getting that feedback from the principals and that type of information. And I'll touch a little bit on the crossing guard program here in a moment. Photo radar. Couple new things with the photo radar. We were able to get a new piece of technology for doing our photo radar at a reduced cost from a different provider. So that'll actually roll out tomorrow. Will be our first day with our new technology. We did see a reduction in tickets from 2017 to 2018, but we also did have days lost to deployment just due to equipment issues. There were quite a few days in there that were equipment issue problems where we lost some of that time, and we just weren't able to make it up because we had continuous problems, which we should see that resolve with the new equipment and a little bit different service. Some current initiatives that I just wanted to touch on. We've had a lot of dog animal type issues this year, and we've actually been doing dog adoptions recently, kind of getting, instead of necessarily giving it away to another organization, we've been working with the public and putting these animals up for adoption once they've been held for long enough. As well, Jerry, again in the CPO or school resource program, has been quite busy with the schools. One of the exciting things that he's been working on recently is the crossing guard program. It hasn't come to fruition yet due to some issues with some interim principals, and as well they wanted to wait for some of the changes with crossings around the schools so that they didn't have to retrain the kids twice to learn the new setups. So hopefully in the new year here, once they're a little bit more stable with their principals, we should have a crossing guard program in place for the elementary schools. As well, we've been using our district system, so our CPOs have been getting more familiar with each of their districts, just allowing them to get a better picture of the issues that happen with each one of those districts. So far, I think it's been a pretty positive program from our part. Allows them to spend a little bit more time concentrating on specific areas of the town. Moving forward, we are going to look at our policy and procedure manual for the CPOs to make sure it lines up with any of the changes for providing service for Coaldale. We want to try and work good on communication with the public and make sure that we're engaging them as much as we can in a positive way, so that it's not always necessarily in a negative way that we interact and engage with them. And then working heavily with the schools on safe routes to school and ensuring that it's as best as it can be for that. So that's kind of the CPO portion. The emergency management portion for 2018. These are some of the training events that we did do throughout this year. It was quite a heavy year for some of our staff for training. Myself and Spencer attended the AEMA Summit last week, which was a great event this year, and gave us lots of ideas to carry the program into the future. Upcoming next year, we want to look at a little bit more in-depth training for EOC staff. And continuing with ICS training, ICS train the trainers so that we can do more in-house programs with that, as well as developing a full-scale exercise, hopefully to be conducted in May, and some more training and planning around evacuation and damage assessment should something happen. Moving forward, we're going to have to review our plan and bylaw and just ensure that with any of the changes in the Emergency Management Act that we are meeting all those requirements. And then coming in 2020, the regulation will be released as well. So there will be changes involved with that. But next year we're going to be heavy into business continuity and disaster recovery planning and training to move us forward. Also, a little bit that came out of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency Summit was ability for partnerships with schools such as NAIT, Justice Institute possibly, or maybe even Royal Roads, to be able to use some of their academic students to contribute to our program, but it also gives them a way to build up some of their schooling. And that's it.
Thank you for a well put together presentation. I'll open the floor to any questions of council. Councillor Chapman.
Your Worship, through to our Deputy Chief of Public Safety, Clayton. Business licenses, so 14%, is that reflective on the business activity that's going on without stopping into the town office for a business license, or what's happening there?
That's a lot of follow-up, just making sure that they have their business licenses in place and that type of thing. A lot of that was conducted last January, February, I believe, through that process, just to follow up with contractors, that type of stuff around to make sure that they do have business licenses.
So that wasn't something like the 14% wasn't that they were being charged or fined or anything like that. Okay. The dog adoption program that you've instituted, you have a policy process for how the adoption process works?
Yes, so there has to be an application filled out as well as an interview that goes along with that, and that's conducted by our community peace officers to actually move through the dog adoption process. And typically the money from the adoption goes back to cover anything that vet bills, anything like that we've had to do to make sure the dog is healthy.
So that's something you want to keep in-house for the time being until, or
I think
is there going to be further review of that?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of success doing it ourselves. I think we've only had one dog recently that we've had to pass off to another organization just because it's been sitting there for adoption for quite some time. So we have been quite successful in doing that.
The CPO program, are you looking at expansion again after December, or is this going to be sort of like are you going to try to keep it in-house for the time being?
Yeah, after the end of December, we will be looking after the town of Coaldale and not in the regional model.
Okay, thank you. And final question about schooling.
Yes.
I really support that idea and that plan. And are you planning to do it beginning in the fall of September again, or what's the startup date for that?
I'm looking at hopefully we can get some of the A school involved within our full-scale exercise to be able to come in and maybe help us out, whether it's the design phase or the execution of that exercise. It's a good opportunity for them to get experience and can give us some extra thoughts about the emergency management stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? And entertain a motion to receive for information with our gratitude for a well-prepared report. Councillor Chapman, any discussion? All in favor? All right, now, Cindy. Anybody have any questions for Cindy on the development stats or comments? Councillor Chapman?
Maybe through to Cindy, on the institutional values, so these playgrounds and that, they would not be considered a development permit for an upgrade or renovation or anything like that?
No, they wouldn't require a permit, so it's just anything that would, a building type that would require a permit.
Thank you.
Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering, Cindy, just noticed that our new home starts this year are down considerably from the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. Have you had any discussion with any builders as to why that is happening? Is it going to be a long-term trend in their mind? Is it because of the new finance policy with the federal government, or is this just a blip on the map and something that we shouldn't be concerning ourselves with?
I haven't had a talk specifically with them about it. What I've kind of heard is happening is that builders aren't basically taking on more than they can chew right now. They're starting one home, and if they find a purchaser for it, they may start another one in that time while they're still building that one. But until they're trying not to carry more than they need to at this time, just because of the new borrowing and just making sure that they can sell what they have or have somebody in line to purchase what they have.
Okay. Any additional on Councillor Holm?
I'll move for information.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Okay, and then we have correspondence. So we have 10.1. I believe with the current transportation master plan underway that it would be probably good to acknowledge receipt of this letter and advise that we are gonna go and do the wait for the results of the transportation master plan before we. So maybe a motion to table this until after the transportation master plan is received. And Councillor Lloyd. Okay, all in favor? Okay, and then I have to go back. The copy of my agenda, I didn't have one. I overlooked Councillor Simpson for the Chinook Arch.
So for Chinook Arch, they have approached me with Tamara Waits being the alternate. We just need a motion to allow her to be the alternate on Chinook Arch board, as she's the chair of the library board right now. So, and then that way she has a right to vote if she has to fill in for me at any point. So I'd like just to make a motion to make her the alternate for Chinook Arch from myself.
Okay. We have a motion by Councillor Simpson. Any discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried.
And just on a side note with that, because they do have an upcoming meeting quite soon, so if we could send them that motion, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
And then we have information items 10.2, 10.3, and 10.4. Councillor Lloyd?
Is that what you're looking for?
I would say to receive and acknowledge receipt of their direct administration to respond to direct the response be made to the 10.2 and 10.3 as applicable. I don't think there's any real L's 10.4 is already captured in today. Would that be your motion then? Okay. Okay. Councillor White moves receive for information 10.2, 10.3 with an appropriate response being provided to the writer. And all in favor? Okay, that's carried. And then 10.4, a motion to receive for information. Councillor Simpson, all in favor? Okay. And a motion to go in camera. Councillor Pauls, all in favor?